That's right. Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers. Tiki here.
And Blue Dragon 5.
And Rohith Star.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we find ourselves in the midst of Disney's big venture into the world of streaming and having started a war in the process, we thought it would be nice to stay up to date in the ever-growing catalog and roll on what's a must or a bust on Disney Plus. That's right. We're talking Secret Invasion, Episode 6, Home. Isn't that nice? Guys, I don't know. This is going to be a very interesting conversation. Dragon, I know that you're usually a defender of MCU stuff, and honestly, we talked about Episode 2. Episode 2, I thought, was an improvement over Episode 1. I remember you and I were like, okay, this could be going somewhere. I know that had that Olivia Colman scene that was probably the best scene in the whole series in retrospect. I got to tell you, Dragon, because I haven't been on since Episode 2, I don't think. This show really,
I thought you were on for another one.
I might have been. Maybe Episode 3 was the last one I did.
It's very indicative of the quality of the show in light of you forgetting the...
Well, he can't. He brought out his brain. He can't remember anything.
Yeah, this is true. Dragon. This is true. But basically, like, as soon as the super soldier stuff started getting introduced, or not super soldier, but the whole like Avengers DNA.
You mean Super Skrull, Tiki?
Right.
An iconic Fantastic Four bad guy. Wake up, would you?
Jesus, I'm sorry. God.
I'm kidding. It's fine.
As soon as that got introduced, as soon as they pulled the dumb plot twist with Gaia, and then killed off Ben Mendelsohn, and then this. I've had a lot of problems with this show. I think I think the whole who is and who isn't a Skrull thing was just completely butchered, because it turns out that the only Skrull of note who was posing as a major character was the one that literally everyone called before the damn show even started. It was just completely telegraphed to us. Like, I don't know. This whole series has been a mess for me, and I am willing to lay down my lay it down. I think this is the worst Disney Plus Marvel series. I hate to say that, because it does have some good elements, like some good standalone scenes with Sam Jackson, acting with different actors. I know that sounds very no, I know. But
when you do a show, you have actors, and guess what they're going to do? They're going to act against other actors.
Way to do it, Harry Styles, Tiki.
This whole show just broke my brain. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm really I really feel like they kind of butchered an iconic comic storyline. And keep in mind, I'm not a super fan of this storyline, but I know the gist of it. And I feel like the big thing the show lacks is the paranoia angle. It's like I don't know. There's a lot of things this show does wrong. The pacing is just all over the place. For most of the time, it's just very slow, very. And then this episode, man, was the one thing I will give it is that Kingsley Benadir did kind of like bring it at the very end, where he really wasn't bringing it before. But other than that, man, like the whole like, okay, we got to resort to a big super fight with all these, like the traditional Marvel fight. But then we're also going to basically break the MCU in the biggest way that I don't know what it is about MCU finales and like breaking the MCU. Because honestly, I felt sort of the same way about Moon Knight, how it's like, okay, all of a sudden there's like Egyptian gods in the midst. I don't know. This whole finale was a mess, honestly. Yeah. All right. This is not words. I don't know why I'm struggling so much. Rohit, you're a lawyer. Save me.
All right. I wrote
You
this,
have to pay him if you phrase it like that.
I can do pro bono for this
Right.
moment. I wrote this comment on a Discord server, that I'm part of Marvel, and I'm going to say the full thing to summarize my feeling.
Oh dear.
Watching the finale, this is my least favorite MCU Disney Plus show and bottom 5 of MCU projects overall. The finale was whack in terms of resolution. The ending status quo should have been the beginning status quo of this show. CGI was awful in the Gravik and Gaia fight. There is not even a post-credit scene in this show. The only consistently good part of the show is Coleman's performance as Sonia Fallsworth, and I hope her and Emilia Clarke's guy are in a better project, maybe a Captain Britain MI13 project. And as such, I say this to the viewers at home. If you want an espionage thriller show on Disney Plus, watch Andor. If you want to watch an espionage thriller that's set in MCU, watch The Winter Soldier. This show is a disappointment of its initial premise and the biggest waste of the talents of star-studded cast that I've ever seen in a major IP property. I hope to God that Brave New World, Thunderbolts, and Armor Wars are good to great. The geopolitical espionage corner of the MCU needs to be better represented with projects the quality of Wakanda Forever rather than that of Black Widow and Secret Invasion. This show needs to be dropped in New Skrulls, and be consumed by radiation poisoning and die a slow and painful death. Forget the show.
So, Dragon, did you like it?
I mean, here's the thing. I there's a lot about this I liked. There is.
I feel
this specific episode in isolation with itself, and you factor into the whole. I mean, I'm not a ranking guy, really. I'm just kind of grown out of that. I just, when I look at it now, it's kind of hard for me, looking at these Disney Plus shows, because again, they are all suffering from the same issue. I mean, this one I think somewhat subverted that issue, but let me put it this way: when I first played the episode, I saw the runtime. I was like, oh no, when will they learn?
Yup.
Why must we shortchange the final episodes, and this what leads to all the problems? So I did think that when I was going into it, but I gotta be honest, when I was watching through the episode, structurally, in terms of the presentation of the episode, I mean, I thought the pacing of the action was good, and how it kind of was like, kind of woven with the narrative. We did a few parallels to some other, there's a little bit of Winter Soldier parallel to one moment in this episode that I did appreciate. Obviously, not shoulder to Winter Soldier by any stretch, not shoulder to Metal Arm by any stretch. But yeah, it was when you there's a great reveal in this episode, but it's like one of those reveals when you think about it, it's like, does it undercut what we were actually doing in that moment? Now that we know what we know, So I mean, I have issues with Secret Invasion. That this episode I think was so close to kind of like I think slam dunking in certain respects, but again, it's just still like we still don't know why the heck we did the Skrulls dirty in in the show, which is why the Skrulls kind of went bad and had a chip on their shoulder. We still don't fully know like what the heck happened. I was really hoping by the finale we were going to address that. We kind of did for a moment, like, oh god, we're doing it, and then it's like, well, not technically though.
That's where the whole twist, I assume, is coming in. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, we have really good, obviously, performance-wise, we're top tier in here. I think honestly, I think the biggest strength of the show has been Sam Jackson, his acting ability on display. I mean, I think I said this from the beginning with this show. I mean, I think after there's a little bit of an episode one, maybe I've mentioned it since the beginning. Sam Jackson had another 6-episode miniseries. It's on Apple TV Plus called Last Days of Ptolemy Gray. It's Ptolemy spelled with a P.
Dragon, your ability to keep track of all these streaming shows genuinely impresses me.
That's the thing. So he did this show, I believe, it's 6 episodes. It's a similar to basically it's kind of it's an Old Man Fury-esque tale. Essentially, I think it's based on a book. It's kind of like Flowers for Algernon, but with Sam Jackson. Essentially, an old man with dementia gets an injection, and he kind of retains his memory and his intelligence, and he's kind of trying to solve a murder. It's really good. Anyway, so I can kind of see those moments of acting in Sam Jackson here, and I appreciate them and what we're saying about Nick Fury in those places. And I think we kind of had this great moment in this episode where we really were about to bring that to fruition. Sorry, and I don't know. I'm conflicted about how that went down. That makes me go back to the series and kind of mull it over. I mean, hearing you guys bring it up, it does kind of occur to me. I wonder if this is the weakest link of the Disney Plus series. But because they've all for the most part had the same pattern, the same issue, which this show kind of broke and kind of inverted, where it feels like we kind of got some of our best stuff in this last episode, and 5 did not quite have that star-studded thing. So we kind of inverted it, but we still kind of petered out by kind of cutting the episode length in half. So I don't know. I don't know if it's the worst of these shows. I mean, it sounds like by process of elimination, it probably is. I know a lot of people were harsh on What If. I really liked What If, so I'm not the judge.
What If is definitely better than this.
That's what I'm saying. I'm a sucker for What If, so I don't know that might. I can't really objectively rule on What If.
I'm one of those people that didn't like overall. I like certain episodes, but I think overall What If didn't really, didn't really hold together for me. But I just think to me, and I don't know if I mentioned this to Tiki, I mentioned this here. It's like when I think of all the other Disney Plus shows in comparison to Secret Invasion, for whatever their flaws with the pacing and the rush finales, all that stuff, I can confidently state that each Disney Plus show had a particular identity and certain focus on a theme, on a character arc, on just a certain vibe. And so even if all the other shows prior to Secret Invasion didn't necessarily fire on all cylinders 100% of the time, I felt that at the end of the day, the creators, whether in front and behind the camera, had an idea, had a vision of what they wanted to say with X or Y character. For WandaVision, it was about grief. For the Falcon Winter Soldier, it was about race in America. For Loki, it was about finding one's purpose in light of the chaos of an idea such as the multiverse. Hawkeye is about moving past your grief and spending time with your loved ones, the holidays. Moon Knight was about dealing, with sort of your trauma and grappling with that in the context of mental illness. Miss Marvel is about heritage and reconciling that in the superhero context and coming of age. She-Hulk, it's the cat themes about feminism, just sort of identity with a self-aware meta comedic angle. And Secret Invasion, the premise of there is an alien group that were refugees and are trying and are taking on the Secret Invasion to find a home for themselves because the world's greatest spy broke the promise of finding them a new home. That's an inherently compelling premise, but in the overall
like displacement and betrayal.
From overall, the promise is episode 1, and then what happens in episode 6. There is no central honing in on Nick Fury's responsibility that was broken to the Skrulls. There's no sense of Nick Fury changing and growing as a character. The fact that we had 2 of his closest friends in Hill and Talos kind of not really weigh upon him, it feels like by the end of this show. It feels to me that this show, and I mentioned this to Tiki, I don't know if Boudreaux, you're following on the behind the scenes, the production process for this show, but I remember, I think in 2021, 2022, there were significant reshoots for in Russia or in Eastern Europe. And it definitely feels like to me that the terrorist group, the Americans Against Russia in the show, was originally supposed to be likely not Ukraine, Eastern European terrorist group, and then they would cause like Russia to be more formally involved. And then, in light of current events, things had to be really retooled. And so, when I see moments where I can distinctly feel the ADR line and the way certain scenes are edited together, it feels to me that the original idea of the original what was shot for this show could not be aired because it would cause unfortunate linkages or parallels with current events, and then was reshot and retooled and re-edited, did not ultimately undercut the foundation of the show and robbed the potency of such actors like Samuel L. Jackson, Emilia Clarke, Kingsley Ben-Adir, and ultimately for me, it just feels that I've been persistently a defender and I'm an appreciator of a lot of Phase 4 projects, and for me to feel this way about Secret Invasion, for me Tiki to be on the same page on a Disney Plus Marvel show is astounding.
But bringing it up, it does factor something with all of these Disney Plus shows, is that they all have, at least for the most part, let's say majority of them have this thing where there's a clear idea that's set up. There's a lot of potential in that idea, and then we bring in the limitations.
Yeah.
Imposing all of these limitations being either in budget or more so just in terms of, well, for Secret Invasion, this limitation is crippling in this case. The limitation of, hey, we can't give you the whole toy box on this one. Okay, you got the best we can give you. We'll give you a roadie. We'll give you a War Machine. That's all you get.
So here's my response to that. The thing is, even without the limitation, if the premise of the show as it was had to be a very tight, granular spy thriller, because for the original Secret Invasion storyline, like the Skrulls throughout most of Marvel Comics history, outside of a few like scanned individuals, were portrayed as like how a lot of alien races in sci-fi are like their one morality. In this case, Skrulls were just the bad guy alien. And thus that made Secret Invasion such a potent as like, oh, invasion of the body snatchers, but in the Marvel universe. However, for the Skrulls in the MCU, the fact that they're recontextualized as this like disparate migrant refugee group that was kicked out of their home by like an evil imperialistic alien empire in the Kree, you couldn't do the same Secret Invasion story without undermining the value of the twist in Captain Marvel. So the initial premise of like, all right, these are these refugees that have been radicalized to take over Earth because their promises were broken and they feel marginalized. There's a lot to mine, but it just wasn't mined. It barely even made like more than 2 inches beyond what was established in the second episode. And for me, the second episode with like Fury's dialogue with Talos about humans can't even handle each other. How can they handle an entirely different species? That should have been the main thrust of the show. And the fact of the finale, when like Gravik is like putting his heart out and expressing how he feels betrayed, he's saying it to someone, to not even Nick Fury.
Mm-hmm.
So Nick Fury saying all this is like, is that what Nick Fury actually feels? And Guy is just replicating that to Gravik, or is that how Guy interprets Nick Fury to feel about the Skrull situation?
I think it's the only way to read. You're right. We don't know. I think the way to interpret it is that that's her impressions of the situation, but we don't know.
Yeah, and thus you kind of take away the thematic resolution about Nick Fury, the world's best spy, but being the best spy, being sort of a crappy human being in certain parts of his life.
That's the thing. Nick Fury's always he's in the moral gray, and that's kind of his premise as a character, in which like you think, okay, good guy's got an eye patch, we like this guy, but really, Nick Fury has, he's the more likable Amanda Waller of Marvel Comics in terms of like, we associate him with the good guy, but he is, he's doing a lot of, kind of shady things constantly.
Yeah, like
shady things for the greater good, but still shady things.
In the MCU alone, in the first Avengers movie, Captain America pointed out you're using hydrotech to make weapons of war, and then in the Winter Soldier, Nick Fury was on board
Project
with
Insight.
Until he finds out that the agency that's implementing said program is overtaken by like the closest equivalent to Nazis without saying the word Nazi. And I feel like for me, like Nick Fury is a character, like, you know how people have feelings about like, oh, Hulk is not like how I remembered him in the MCU post Ragnarok or Endgame. Yeah. For me, I feel like Nick Fury hasn't been the same since the Winter Soldier, and I think like from after the Winter Soldier, it's been diminishing returns.
Well, he's been. It's not even so much that he's been out of character; it's just the fact he's been reduced so much.
That's what I'm feeling. It's not really out of character. It's just like he, like the what made Nick Fury interesting as a character has been so minimized, and like Captain Marvel, it was kind of a fun thing, but it's like it feels to me that Nick Fury has kind of been more like not like a comedic relief character, but just more emphasized like, oh, this is the fun Samuel Jackson doing like quips and all that. And it's like, Nick Fury is a guy who would do the right thing, but would also do a few bad things to eventually do on the path to doing the right thing.
All right, we got some comments. Let's read those.
Yeah, we got a ton of comments from Code Geass and Richard's victims, as always.
You're sure these are comments, not just conversation between two commenters, right?
Well, yeah, no, they were having a conversation about She-Hulk, and I will say my argument for She-Hulk is that I think Secret Invasion probably had a couple higher highs than She-Hulk did, but She-Hulk had more of an identity. Like that show at least knew what it wanted to be. maybe people didn't like what it wanted to be, but at the end of the day, I feel like it set out to be this weird meta, kind of social commentary, and it was. Anyway, so comments here do relating to the actual episode, not just because there's just a lot of different commentary on different MCU shows here. Kogia says, I like Nick Fury getting more screen time, but aside from that, Secret Invasion was mid-tier. Okay, this is one of the things that broke. Well, hold on. I want to use that as a jumping off point in the conversation. Richard's Victim says, imagine making a show about a shape-shifting alien race secretly invading Earth by disguising themselves as real leaders. This boring. Yeah, no, I mean it that really is. It's the whole thing was kind of just boring. Okay, I'm sorry, guys.
You just throw them up on the screen too.
Yeah, the two big things here. One, Kogia says, I was surprised that they got rid of Talos because the series seemed like a buddy story between him and Fury at first. Yeah,
it didn't really help that Guy had trouble getting off the ground, and then we're gonna kill off the more interesting of our good guys Skrulls here, and it's like, and we're kind of stuck with the undeveloped one.
And considering what happens to the status quo of the Skrulls, it's kind of really it feels like the show just really undermined Talos's worldview, right? Because Talos's whole thing is that hey, if we show ourselves as the best as we can be, humanity will or can accept us. But at the end of the show, the U.S. president announces the Skrulls exist and puts a witch hunt on them, and the Skrulls have to kind of rely on the maybe promise of Nick Fury and Nick Fury's wife delegating a deal with their former oppressors, the Kree, into giving them back Skrullos. It just feels it feels to me it's there's so much that could have been done with Talos and Gravik being a Charles Xavier Magneto of the Skrulls. But that's dropped, and it's okay, maybe Nick Fury would adopt Talos' viewpoint, or maybe Gaia could take on Talos. There's nothing.
I mean, that's not necessary
reason to kill off Talos. I really don't.
Well, it's not entirely true, because by the end of the show, with the big moment that we do have, and where it's kind of open season on Skrulls, Fury does see Talos's point full on. He's adopted his worldview by the end of the show, and you do feel that moment. I'm not saying you're right, but don't explore it nearly enough. I'm saying it is at least there is a payoff there to at least him having that argument with Talos earlier on. So we do pay that off.
The payoff is he gives lip to the president.
Yeah,
considering this is the same Nick Fury that did give lip to the World Security Council in the first Avengers movie. I don't feel like that's a significant change on.
Well, I'm not saying we have to compete with it. I'm just saying.
What I'm saying is that I think considering Talos' death and what Talos meant to Nick, or I feel like what Talos should have meant to Nick, I feel like Nick Fury didn't I feel like Nick Fury didn't do much at the end. He may feel that he has Talos' perspective, but thinking Talos' way and then doing your best or going out of your way to implement that, I feel like that was not there. And I think the fact that him and his wife are now together, and that's the big change in the status quo, for Nick Fury, and he goes back to Saber, and it's okay, for considering the fact that there's now people that are hunting down Skrulls and shooting whoever, even whether it's someone that actually is a Skrull or someone that isn't a Skrull, for the average Skrull on Earth, they're the most hunted, prey. And I just feel like that there should have been more on Nick Fury's part to maybe provide sanctuary, maybe hunt down the Skrulls and take them to Saber. Something that could have been more tangible on Nick Fury's part to actually fulfill the promise that he broke before with the Skrull civilization. I didn't feel like that's
because when you break it down, essentially the status quo for the Skrulls is kind of almost worse for them at the end of the show.
See, yes. I think that here's the challenge. I think with the Skrulls and what maybe what led to this, or at least this issue that we have in the episode, is that okay, for the Skrulls to have maximum impact, basically be iconically what the Skrulls do, the whole who's secretly a Skrull sort of thing, all that, which the show was initially marketed on, but based on the story, but obviously we didn't fully get that. But I mean, until the very end, until the whole people, the danger of knowing the Skrulls are around and what kind of that brings on people, which I thought was a really great idea, and showcasing the dangers of that in society reacting in a very negative way. But
right, and it's a cool idea, but it's literally just like an idea that they introduce right literally at the very end. Like
no, and to add on to that whole ending, that should have been the beginning like scene of this show. That like, oh, people are now aware that aliens are out there impersonating them, and then Nick Fury has to come in to like try to protect the Skrulls or and like not have humanity like go like nuts further. And that's the thing, because then you have the paranoia angle, you have like, oh, like if this one like pundit is a Skrull, imagine who else the government and all that. Like I think the fact that like Shooter McGavin, he was cast as like this
Christopher McDonald. Okay, he's more than just
excuse me. Christopher McDonald. He was cast as like this like pundit commentator guy as like a nod to certain figures in the media, and it's like, oh, this would be interesting to see how you stoke the fears of nations. And he's only there for like one or two scenes. One scene in the first episode, another scene in the second episode, and then he gets killed off. And it's like I think back to the interviews where it's like, oh, this is a character that will be in like that could stay on the long of the MCU, and like, oh, this is gonna be fleshy on the geopolitical. It's like people stoking fears and like cause division. Nope, he just gets shot at the end, and it's just like, okay, this is just that he got wasted as a character. But
my point is that I think the reason things ended up the way they did is that we need this for the Skrulls to have maximum impact. We need them to be with humanity so they can shapeshift into people that they could blend in, that we could recognize that will have an impact on the greater MCU. Versus like, okay, Fury takes them all into space. Convince them, okay, guys, it's not safe for here. Come to space with me. It's like, so they're going to shapeshift into more aliens, or just be a nameless army with a really cool look that can shapeshift into people we don't really care about.
Well,
that feels like why we're kind of stuck with him on the Earth at the end.
No. I don't have an issue with him being stuck on Earth. I'm just thinking it's like, okay, the way to have there's like throughout the entire show, there is never a moment of paranoia or thing where like Luthor's talking to someone and he doesn't know if that person is or isn't a Skrull. And that was like, I remember the first episode where like Ravage is turning into all the people that Nick Fury saw earlier in that episode. I was like, oh, this is gonna hype up the paranoia tension. That never gets that's never brought to that level ever again past that first episode. And so what is the purpose in the Skrulls being in the story, where if you're not having them constantly like manipulate people into giving them information and causing fear and paranoia, like this is just like,
I feel like the implementation of Rhodey was a significant kind of like mishandling of what the Skrulls are. Just because, like I said, it's like Rhodey, he's already so obvious. It's like even just based on the foundation of of his role within the cast and within the MCU as a whole, like he's prominent enough where it's like if he was a Skrull, it would be a good shift. But at the same time, like he's just acting so sketchy throughout literally the entire run of the show. It's not a surprise at all. It's not a reveal. Like you're not even really like in suspense about it, and that is kind of like the thing that they really don't get.
Yeah.
And besides Rhodey, there's really no one. There's literally no one in the show that you even have any sort of like, oh, are they a Skrull or aren't they kind of tension.
I guess it feels like, I think it feels like, within just giving them 6 episodes, which apparently already we're kind of on, mainly by the second half, we're on a sparse runtime. It feels like, I guess at some point in the writing, they felt like we don't have enough landscape story-wise. We don't have enough, basically we don't have enough time to really get into the whole paranoia aspect, which was a mistake, clearly, but it feels like that's kind of what the end of the writing process. Like, we don't have time to get into all those beats from this story, but we're gonna still give them Skrulls. We're gonna shapeshift. We're gonna do all the cool Skrull stuff, purple blood, etc., etc. But we're missing the
Richard
point.
Victim says, imagine if they made someone like Falcon a Skrull. Yeah,
Now
exactly.
again, that would have you would have had layers of Earth Mightiest Heroes with Captain America becoming a Skrull, but
or
you knew
even
Captain America.
or even with just the people we had. Like, imagine if Maria Hill was a Skrull, and that would have kind of rattled Nick Fury, because Nick Fury is supposed to be the spy that knows everyone else's secrets, everyone where the bodies are buried. If someone that close to him was a Skrull and not a Skrull that he knew personally, that would add so much permanent attention, because then Nick Fury is like, oh, am I really lost my edge, or am I really going against someone that is that above me in terms of espionage? And that those things like that, it's just
Let
like,
me ask you this: do you think it was so the whole Vara thing? Do you think she should have? It should have been the thing of like where Fury did not know his wife was an enemy Skrull. Well, obviously, we had a thing where he knew he was married to a Skrull, but then it turns out she was kind of like, she was kind of working, she was working for the bad guys. She was working for the opposition somehow. Which still, here's the thing: there's a logic hole in that, by the way. The whole like, so wait a minute, how far? Okay, if she was tasked with like getting dirt on Fury and everything, there's a question of like that was before like they all thought Fury abandoned him and everything. That was like who gave that order? That was before Graphic was a little boy at that point. That was before Graphic was gaming the system. Someone told her to do that, and I'm thinking it was that Skrull Emperor we never mentioned again after that one name drop.
It was the way I interpreted it is that, like, it seemed that when Fury got blipped, that's when Gravik sort of laid the seeds for the growing dissent, dissatisfaction. To by the time he comes back, it's probably a fully run operation. And so the fact that and Nick Fury probably wasn't aware of that operation, and so him sending Gravik and his team to collect the blood of the Avengers, had he
No. Yeah, that's true. I'm just saying the fact that his wife was specifically tasked with you. We want you to get close to this Fury guy and put on a face that he's gonna like.
What I imagined was that when Fury was blipped, like Vara, was lost, and Gravik probably
got in her head and turned her against him.
Yeah, and then when Nick Fury came back, it's like, hey, this is the time to fight for your people.
See, that's the point that I feel they really glazed over if that was there, because I don't think that translated at all. Because the way it plays to me is just the fact that it really just plays like there was a betrayal from the beginning. That's the way he's playing it in the scene. That's how it conveys to me. That's some plot stuff that we didn't get.
I think the way I can sort of see where you're coming from, because I think when Nick,
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I don't think they put a fine point on that at all. That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of vagaries in this show. I know there's ambiguity with Skrulls, but this is like ridiculous.
No, the thing with this show is that there's a difference between ambiguity and just underwriting a story. Yes. And this show is very much underwriting.
Especially Gaia. Wait,
I'm sorry, Rohith. I believe you mean Goya. I'm sorry, this is the last time I'll do that.
I appreciate the Ben Mendelsohn accent.
Goya.
Okay.
Goya. The only reason I make fun of it is just because it was really painfully obvious they were stressing her name just because it's like, we got Emily Clark, god damn it. We're gonna use her and people are gonna care about her character.
I think that for Gaia in this show, she is so underwritten, and Emilia Clarke is not a bad actress. She can do well when given the right material, but man, she was not given much. And I've seen Emilia Clarke in interviews. It feels to me that Gaia, when she's in the story, she was brought in, and then it just feels so kind of icky that the prominent female character in Nick Fury's life, like Maria Hill, gets killed off and then gets replaced by this one character who's got superpowers and is played by Emilia Clarke of Game of Thrones fame. And it's just like, man, I just Kobe Smolder is just I'll be part of the show. I was like, oh, I'll get killed off at the end of the first episode and never.
I mean, let's call a spade here. Maria Hill was fridged.
Yeah, I'll concede on that, because man, it just feels like the deaths for these, like for Maria Hill and Talos.
And Talos was fringed.
Well, here's the
And
thing. So
also-
with Maria Hill,
also-
it feels.
Yeah.
Maria Hill, with Maria Hill, it feels like, again, it's kind of a systemic issue of like Maria Hill was introduced in the Avengers movie. And originally, the way that movie was supposed to open was going to be literally her full-on introduction into the world and everything. Like she was being, it was because Maria was supposed to have an even bigger role in the first Avengers movie.
Mhm.
Now, the way that went down,
It's supposed to be the audience surrogate.
essentially, yeah. Essentially, she was
like the way there was like a deleted opening scene where
she was a framing device. If we would have started like Maria Hill, like kind of
recounting
recapping
the
what happened during the battle.
But the thing was that how she was characterizing it, or in terms of how Kobe Smulders played it, she played it closer to how Maria Hill was portrayed in the comics, where Maria Hill was more of an antagonist to the Avengers, specifically the new Avengers Bendis' run. But in the MCU, she's just kind of like Nick Fury's right-hand woman, and that's just it. And Kobe Smulders is like,
in broad spectrum, the idea is she becomes the new Coulson. That's essentially what the idea is.
Yeah, and nothing else. And considering like Kobe Smulders has had like a big run in like How I Met Your Mother and has done well and like just random indie movies. It's like
they liked bringing her back, but they didn't. For her big story, Maria Hill's the whole reason to bring in Maria Hill is Civil War, and she wasn't even in that movie.
Or just in any of the big geopolitical espionage things. She wasn't in the Falcon and Winter Soldier. She wasn't in Black Widow, and she wasn't even in Wakanda Forever. And it's like, I think like Everett Ross, like a guy who's only been in 2 movies, has more characterization, personality.
I genuinely think you're right. I honestly, Everett Ross to me is one of the most likable pieces of the MCU still left that they haven't really ruined.
So again, ultimately, it feels like, well, we're kind of stuck with Maria Hill. Like, why not? Let's not prolong the inevitable any further. Let's just kill her off. Which kind of feels sad because again, Kobe Smulders is really good casting, and I liked seeing her, but it just feels like we weren't really doing much with her. So sadly, she had to go.
Yeah, I also feel really bad for Talos because Ben Mendelsohn is like one of the. Like I liked him in Captain Marvel, but he was so good as Secret of Age. I was like, oh,
yeah, same. Honestly, like I really didn't feel one way or another about him in Captain Marvel. Honestly, I was kind of thrown off by the character. This isn't his fault. I think he did a good job, but I was kind of thrown off by the whole thing where it's like, okay, Skrulls are supposed to be the bad guys, and then we're being introduced to them through this guy who's almost kind of like a comic relief character in that movie.
Yeah.
And here he got a lot of pathos. I think the problem is
Talos got pathos.
The problem is I just don't really feel like his death even accomplished much. I feel like go ahead.
And also
seemingly it was, but then we didn't. I'm sorry, go on.
Also, it's like we get introduced to Talos in Secret Invasion. It's like, oh, my wife died off screen. And it's like, man,
that was a big problem too. Yeah, that was a big.
Our first scene should have been her
getting red flag right from the get-go.
Our first scene should have been her getting killed.
Here's the thing: imagine if Talos and Sword were together, and they were both as parents trying to get their kid back to the light, just like how Han and Leia were trying to get back Ben Solo. And also, think of it this way: you would have had such an interesting parallel with Talos and Soren, how loving they are as a couple, and how open and honest they are. Versus the relationship dynamic with Nick Fury and Vara. That would have been that would have been an interesting parallel. It would have been it's just like, no, we're just gonna kill her off screen. And Gaia, like as Emilia Clarke, I feel like also the direction, like I feel like Emilia Clarke just was not directed well when she's reacting to that information. Like a lot of scenes, it just feels like Emilia Clarke is just like not putting her full thing. And I feel like I
honestly feel the same way about Kingsley Ben-Adir. And Rohit, you and I, we saw Kingsley Ben-Adir honestly have a really standout supporting performance in Barbie. So it's like the man can be super charismatic in a role where he barely even has any lines.
No, and the thing is like what's crazy is that this episode, Kingsley Ben-Adir actually kind of brought it when
he brought it this episode. It's like I was literally thinking like, okay, where the hell was this level of performance the whole time?
It's because the writers and directors just let this cast down. Olivia Colman, I don't know if the just writers really like the character and or really like Olivia Colman that she got the
or Olivia Colman is just incapable of doing a bad performance.
No, yeah,
Rise above direction.
Yeah, and oh God, I was thinking about this one commentator. Just
It's honestly kind of bizarre to think about Olivia Colman even being in this show, since she's just kind of like just such a level above everything else.
But also, when you think about it, the one YouTuber made this point. It's like, Olivia Colman's like Sonya Fallsworth is a fun character, but it's like he made this point as native versus movies. He's like, it's kind of weird that like Val, played by Julie Louis-Dreyfus, wasn't in Secret Invasion.
Yeah.
And on because the thing is, it's like in the comics, Valentina, Allegra, and Nick Fury have a past. They were romantic partners and whatnot. I don't think could have done the same thing, but I feel like Julie Louis-Dreyfus could have been more fleshed. Val could have been could have been even further.
I feel like her character needs to be more fleshed out too. Like, because at the end of the day, I feel like she's just kind of like, oh, she's like a quirky female Nick Fury, except she's recruiting bad guys.
And she's American. And then you have the quirky, like, mortally ambiguous female Nick Fury who's British with Sonya Fallsworth.
Right.
Character. And the thing is, both actresses are great. They're both great in past roles. And it's like, okay, I just feel like, I'm just wondering, Kevin Feige, whoever's like, is like, okay, if these two characters interact, it just feels like a lesser version of when Tony Stark interacted with Doctor Strange. Do you get what I mean?
Sure. Dragon, you said you had something to say.
Yeah. It feels like, just given in retrospect, you look at it, just given the comics history-wise, you had Nick Fury and the Contessa having a dynamic and relationship and everything. It feels like ultimately Val absolutely should have been the Sonya character. Admittedly, would have lost the Olivia Colman of it all, which really adds to the performance. But in retrospect, it feels like the role of that character is the thing. If we just give Val kind of that screen presence, it might have. I don't know. I know story-wise, in terms of we need someone kind of in Russia, but I don't know. Somehow we could have finagled it. It feels like that would have been a really good introduction for her. That also been kind of connected to the lore of Nick Fury, and I think it would have really helped set her up for her future stuff as well. But I think she is very much the better Val right now. That's what she's got going on.
All right, let's talk about something that was brought up in the comments a while ago, and I want to bring it up again because I think it's but Kokios really quick. He says, hold on. Maria Hill was fridged so hard they might as well have crushed her with a refrigerator. Yeah, more or less. It was pretty bad.
He was fridged so hard that you just drag her body out. You can apply it on your head if it's.
Why are all the ice cubes red?
Oh,
the ice maker, it's coming out red. This had better be Kool-Aid.
Okay, hold on, I'm trying to find this comment. It's from a while back. It's about Goya. Sorry.
It sounds like you're saying Goya, a girl, but like
Goya.
Goya.
Goya. Kind of sounds like I'm saying Goyer, isn't David?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Shoot. I'm sorry, guys. Can you find the Kokios' comment about Gaia being overpowered?
It is in the. I don't think he doesn't say anything. Oh, 9:23 p.m.
Yeah. 10:23 my time.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. So I wonder if Emilia Clarke's character is going to be a prominent character in future movies now that she's OP. Okay. Let's talk about the OP thing, man, because that was. I was honestly kind of speechless watching that fight. I was like, oh shit. Okay, we're really going there. We're really going. If anyone has watched Heroes, Dragon, I know you understand this reference. Rohit, I assume you understand this reference.
Yeah, I watched Heroes. Like all seasons.
They went the full Petrelli.
Oh God.
They went the full Petrelli. Never go the full Petrelli.
But Tiki, you don't understand.
You don't understand.
All right. No, seriously. So maybe should we backtrack a little just to the big scene before the power reveal? Or okay, so again, Kingsley Benadir, he's giving a stellar performance, calling Fury out. Just a raw performance of just like him talking about like, do you recognize this face? You know, it's the face of the first man you told me to kill. You know, and the fact that he's going to kill Fury and take a flamethrower to humanity is a really good line. But again, I love Jackson's performance in the scene where he's like affected by radiation. He can't take the iodine pills. As far as he's, at least the way it's being played right now, obviously it's kind of a Trojan horse sort of move, but still, the way that we, the audience, are kind of taking is that Fury isn't sure he's going to make it as. Ultimately, we know he's going to be fine. We didn't know he's going to be fine this way, but we know he's going to be fine because he's going to be
Fury will return in the Marvels. He's coming back, guys. Don't worry.
But still, because of Kingsley Benadir and Sam Jackson, I'm sucked into the scene. I'm like, oh no, man, Fury is just he's given everything. I know he's going to somehow walk out of this scene, but still, it's just the fact that he's, you know, he admits that he knowingly abandoned.
Admittedly, Gaia is kind of hamming it up, man. She is giving a good performance.
Yeah, she is. That's the thing. Fury is like, again, it's kind of showing the respect that she's kind of garnered for Fury here, but also again, like him just saying, this is how it feels. It feels like Fury up and just like knowingly abandoned them, which plays into the things that we've always speculated about Fury. Fury's done the shady things that, you know, he's always owning up to the shadiness here. Like, I knowingly gave up on finding Skrulls because I figured saving 8 billion is more important than changing, basically be more achievable than changing hearts and minds.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that scene plays beautifully and wonderfully. And then gives him the harvest and he says, look, just get off the planet. Okay. That's what I want in exchange for this. Just leave the earth alone, which the way Sam Jackson delivers that too, it feels like that's Nick Fury distilled down to a science though. Just like, I just want to keep the world spinning. That's what he said from the beginning. That's all I want to do.
That's exactly what's so frustrating about it though. In the reveal is that like, I'm sorry, but I do not buy that Gaia has tapped into Nick Fury's psyche that much in the very brief time that she's actually interacted with him.
So that's the thing. So it's a shame that we
have a double-edged sword. It's like, because you're right. It's like as a character moment for Fury, it's great.
And then we have, admittedly, I'm so conflicted. It's kind of a cool reveal, the play here of like, okay, so Gaia has shapeshifted into Fury, which, I mean, it's an iffy payoff to the line last. I'm going to put on a nice face.
Oh, God.
It's like, okay, so some of us were expecting, okay, it might be another MCU character, might be Coulson, might be, who knows who it's going to be. It might be someone.
I was honestly expecting Monica Rambeau to pop up this episode. That would have been my bingo card pick.
Which, again, was her friend, so that was a good, that would have been, I think, that's actually a smart observation, Tiki, but
right. Speaking of which, Monica Rambeau, literally the last time we saw her, she was like joining up with the Skrulls, and then she's just not in this show at all, and yet she's going to be in the Marvels.
Yep. So, anyways, that's the thing. So, it's the fact we have this reveal where she gets turned to a Super Skrull in a clever way, of like, hey, I played possum. Gravik here thinks he's going to Super Skrull up and then beat up our poor old man. Like this poor old man's been beaten up throughout the beginning, all 6 episodes. Like, and your wife's been betrayed.
Pretty much.
Killed Talos, and we've. The harvest. You brought all this danger upon yourselves. And we framed you for shooting Maria Hill. Maria was dying in your arms. Like, how much can we kick this old man? But then Gravik literally kicks the old man. Like, oh God, will it ever stop? Then we reveal, okay, it's guy has a shapeshift into Fury, but by proxy, very cleverly, she too has become Super Skrull. So it's kind of. And again, it was kind of foreshadowed that she kind of did this move before to get the extremists, so she would not be killed by the gunshot by Gravik. So again, I don't know, that works, but then you're right, it completely undercuts the best part of the episode. Like, no.
Yeah, and also like it just feels weird that like Vara. I feel like Vara, like someone. It just feels weird that I think it would have been fine the trick reveal if eventually later in that episode. Like someone confronts Fury about his actual feelings and like his eternal thoughts, and like Vara is like, no, Vara's just like, oh, like are like they're just had like, oh, will we be together? And then in the end they're together, and it's like this is not what this show should like. I think back to the fact that in 2019, when initially the reports was like, oh, there's a Nick Fury show. And like Nick Fury is in the center of the show, but it's more like he gets the spotlight, but not the introspective probing, if that makes sense. Like we get a little bit of his background, we get a little bit of his person.
I honestly feel like, by and large, the wife thing was kind of just like lip service.
Which part specifically?
Just in the sense of like, it's just giving him something to latch onto emotionally, but we're really not going in depth with it at all. Like, it's very much, she almost kind of feels like an accessory more than a full-blown.
Like, it's basically a cute reference to Winter Soldier, and then, I think that's what Tiki said. It starts off as like, oh, here's a payoff to that one line. So he has a wife, and what do we do with the wife?
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, I think she's got great chemistry with him. I do like seeing, Fury's built a life with her and everything. And but you're right that we introduced the whole, like, how does he, the betrayal moment is really good in this show. The fact of, like, they help put the guns on the table and they realize they can't shoot each other. They like each other. That whole, like, the
problem is just that they come back to terms with you. Like, there's no Mr. and Mrs. Smith kind of tension, which I think should have been kind of the thing that they should have drawn from, honestly.
Well, they did the Mr. and Mrs. Smith thing, though.
You know what would have been interesting if instead of Gravik being the villain of the show, if Varl was the villain, and like we find out that she was actually Nick Fury's wife or something.
Would you have gone as far as to make her the Skrull Queen?
No, I think just her being. It would have been interesting if I were to rewrite the show and have Varl be the villain, it would be interesting for me for the show to have been a woman who was a refugee who's taken in and falls in love with this man, and like this is a spy, and is disappointed where he doesn't hold his promise to her and her people, and then grows resentful, bitter, and over the time that she's with this man, even though she loves him, he teaches her things that make her a weapon, and then turns it around and just basically hurts him and by extension his people. So I think that would have been it would have been a more personal, intimate story. And if like Talos was there, Sora was there, it would have been even more like, more personal and more, character focused. Whereas this is just like, for like Gravik, this guy who, was a kid when he met Fury. And like, it just feels so weird that like, in this entire show, they've not had a scene face to face. Like really face to face. Like
that's true. That's actually true.
Yeah. And it's like, if you're like, I think that like, for example, like the Wrath of Khan, like famously, like Kirk and Khan were farther apart, but they had interactions, they see their faces, and then they actually meet and there's like a resolution, all that stuff. It's like, I can understand if it's like a cat and mouse game and like you're moving chess pieces across the board, but it's like.
But the thing with the cat and mouse game is that eventually the cat needs to catch the mouse.
Look at Daredevil season 3. He does not need
exactly. Dragon. That's such a good
very last episode. They're hallucinating. He's hallucinating Fisk, he kind of kills him in that hallucinated moment when he's named by his father. But he does not. Fisk. It builds that three-way fight. They do not inhabit the same space until that three-way fight. And they're yelling at each other and running down the hall. Let's take a pause in the episode. Let's talk about that fight scene. Then we'll come back to it. So they're running at each other. No, I'm kidding.
Sorry. Even before season 3, like season 1, there was like a build up.
You're right. I'm saying there's always a build up with it. I'm just saying season 3 is the really impressive build up. It was like one encounter for like the whole...
season 3 is seriously. I feel like people don't even talk about season 3 being as good as it was as much as they should. Season 3 was fucking perfect.
I agree. Yeah, but
anyway, okay. So the thing with Guy, I like the fact that with Guy we have the moment where. Like it makes sense, like why he was so offended. You don't even remember this face, do you? Like the origin of this face, do you? It's just like, well, yeah, of course she doesn't because she wasn't there.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about the fight. So on one hand, the fight is impressive. On the other hand, the CG on the fight, well, I think
it's not great. It's really not great.
Our Super Skrull, Gravik, the Super Skrull, I think it looks pretty good. Now, on the flip side, the guy's CG does not look good at all.
No.
Reason being, here's why.
Okay.
Because again, we have the human form, which is like the Skrull appendages and everything. Is like, yeah, that's again, like we're giving like a little mini.
It
CG
literally looks like different After Effects elements layered on
That's
top
what I'm saying.
of
Like I can distill it down to one specific image that kind of sums it all up.
Oh
She's
god.
got a little baby Drax arm.
Yeah, the Drax arms. Yes, exactly.
The moment I saw it, it's like, oh man, that doesn't look as impressive as our other Super Skrull. Man, that's not.
I
great.
feel like Deadpool 3. I feel like Deadpool 3 has to like comment on that. Like Deadpool just comes out and his arm just looks like Colossus' arm or just something messed up. But no, I think the CGI and like maybe this is too harsh for me to say this, but I felt like the CGI in that fight scene reminded me of like the randoms of like the CGI at the end of the live action Scooby-Doo movies where like characters like, physically transform. It's like, oh my god.
And again, I think
it
it's
would have been
mainly
a
because
cool reveal if they needed to play like her having multiple powers. Give her all of the Fantastic Four's powers.
yeah, that would have been obviously cool.
It wouldn't have even really made sense, but I'm just saying, as far as like the whole idea of having multiple powers, like,
well, I mean, obviously the big
cool way to kind of like tease up the Fantastic Four.
Well, the big takeaway, honestly, the big reminiscent thing about this fight is, of course, the climax of Rise of the Silver Surfer, which is an homage to the Super Skrull. We actually have a Skrull here, and we have our Super Skrull with the abilities that, again, there's certain powers. It's a shame we couldn't get the correct power set all at once, like the Super Skrull, where we have, for example, he has a Korg arm for him. If we could have given him the Korg arm, and we could have given him, like, if we could have had him, like, light something on fire with the Extremis
You know what's funny is that when I saw that's what kind of made me think of Fantastic Four, is when I saw the Korg arm at first, I thought it was the thing, but then I saw the color and I was like, oh, it's Korg. Okay.
That's the thing. If only we had Ghost. If we just could have, we had Ghost. We had the Korg arm. We had the the Groot stretching ability, which
right. Yeah.
Of that, and if we could have like done the Extremis Fireball, we would have had at least a fill in for all.
Or if they could have built up even like the whole idea of like I stole 4, like built up literally like I have these 4 powers from a secret project back in the 60s.
Okay, no, Tiki, if they said that would have been amazing. But the whole.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. That would have actually
you're saying in general
a moment instead of just like, okay, we're just gonna make Daenerys Targaryen OP, like literally the most OP character in the franchise now.
I think you weren't here for when I talked about this, but yeah, I had serious reservations, and now that we've seen the payoff, I still have reservations about the whole all the DNA in one little vial.
Oh, I hate it. I genuinely hate it. I think what it reminds me of is Heroes. Again, going back to the Heroes thing, it reminds me of the whole idea. The big jump the shark moment for Heroes for me was the whole idea of like, oh, you can just inject Claire's blood into anybody and just automatically bring them back to life. It's like it's that level of like, okay, like that's too much power simplified into too simple of a device. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it feels like I still attest it probably should have been like a briefcase full of vials or like little not the vials but like little like things you plug into the machine, like little slides or something.
A YouTuber I followed when he was evaluating this episode was like, what would have been interesting and cool with that would be that like they have all the powers but they can only use one power at a time. And thus the fight would have been more strategic and more varied because
yeah. And
not OP.
It threw a lot at you. Like there's a Thanos arm, there's a Hulk foot.
And it would have been much easier in the VFX artists because then
come to think of it, that's how Petrelli's power worked, right?
I mean,
once he got the power, could he had to like at least switch between all the powers, right? He couldn't use multiple powers at the same time.
I believe there was a switch. I believe there was, but again, I haven't watched Heroes in like forever.
So. No, I don't blame you.
I didn't even finish Heroes. That's the thing. I watched like probably up to the 3rd season.
I think I watched halfway through the 3rd season. I gave up around the Actually, I hear that the storyline in the second part of season 3 is like the second best element of Heroes besides season 1. I digress. We're going off topic.
Anyway, so point being, I mean, here's what really bothered me about the fight, but then again, there's a rationale to it. So they have their fight, and we have a few neat moments, like Mantis using the Mantis powers for a sec. There, it's like, okay, that was kind of a cool bit, but no, here's the thing. The way we finish off Gravik here, the way we kill him off, so we do a big Captain Marvel blast through the chest, which I mean, it looks impressive. Initially, I was calling out, really, like they have healing factors with Extremis. Couldn't he just walked up? But then I remembered something. Iron Man 3. He killed Savin on the plane, doing the exact same thing. Like, okay, I guess that checks out. I guess we're okay with that. Then.
Well, I think I feel like it was less the repulsor rate, the way like what was shooting is rather what was impacted.
Well, no, I just mean it's still like we didn't take off his head like we probably should have. We just shot him through the.
No, because I think for the like in Iron Man 3, it's like if you hit like you take away like an eternal an eternal awaken, like the heart or whatever, and I think whatever's Gaia hit Gravik like in part of the chest, there had to have been like a critical organ that like without it he's like gone.
Nah, I guess that tracks. Well, regardless, we killed him off in a really neat fashion. But I mean, look, on some level, I was just geeking out the fact we finally did the Super Skrull and we actually made a Skrull with the powers, even though it wasn't the Fantastic Four's powers. And at least half of that fight looked good, Yeah, let's see. So meanwhile, we saved the pod hostage. Okay, here's something people really want to talk about, though. So we save all the pod hostages. We see Ross. We also have Rhodey. Now the big question here is Rhodey with the bum legs. Now here's the thing: are they bum legs or are they numb legs? Okay, is it a question of because the way we have that line, Ross says, Colonel Rhodes, how long you been down here? So that line,
you know what bothered me more than the legs
is the fact that we don't say at the end in a post-credit scene, okay, how long has it been?
Well, yes, I mean that the ambiguity of that is kind of bad, but what really bothered me, just logistically, why does he have no facial hair?
Well, wait, did Ross have facial hair? I think he did, right?
Yeah,
No.
he did.
Okay. That's a good question.
No, wait.
Some people
Ross at least had a little bit of stubble.
Was that okay? Well, if it's just stubble, it doesn't count. But I mean, didn't he have a beard? I thought he may have had.
Rohith, you're no on Ross.
Hey, what?
Are you thinking no on Ross? I thought I heard you say no.
No, I thought I don't remember him like having any significant like.
Yeah, so I don't know. That to me is just like a big kind of like plot gap. It's like, what is there? Like, I just imagine like there's just like a very over attentive scroll part making sure.
It might be alien technology. It might be something like okay, they're in stasis, so you're not going to grow.
Well, no, because I know like for like actual people that are like, well, not personally, but it's like I think for people who are in comas and hospitals, it's like there's always a nurse that has to like.
Yeah, there is. I mean, that's
hygiene. They have to like do stuff with their legs because the thing is for like a body to like lay on a bed for so long, like
bed sores and all sorts of.
So I think that's probably it's probably a little bit more compassionate, but I feel like that's the only way you can explain why these like people look don't look.
Well, either that or stasis again, like an alien stasis thing where there's not going to grow hair because the little purple beams are in their heads.
Yeah.
Possible. I mean, I don't know. I think it's probably the scroll. I think the scroll.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right, though, Dragon. The whole thing where we get no resolution about where, like, when did Rhodey?
See that we really need an Armor Wars setup post credit scene. We did not get that.
It was crazy.
We need a Marvel's setup. I mean,
no, we don't need a Marvel. We know what's gonna happen. He walks to the thing. Because here's the problem: in a perfect world, what would have happened if Disney get its ducks in a row? Would have been like, hey, we're gonna have this Secret Invasion show, and then again, if it went great, we would have people would be hyped for it, like they'd be invested. We wouldn't have to like advertise everything so far in advance. Like, hey, then we're gonna give them the Marvels trailer at the end to hype everyone up. And now Fury made it to the end of the rainbow. There was the Marvels trailer. Aren't you happy? We don't have to worry about this whole marketing thing of like it's Fury's last story. Not really, because we know he's gonna be in the Marvels.
It's so crazy to me that not so crazy. Like, I think they intentionally didn't say
because I bet you they probably don't know, and they're leaving it to whoever is picked as a screenwriter for Armor Wars to decide and upon the particular plot detail, and that plot detail works with Feige's vision for Rhodey.
This is what's frustrating. Feige's got a vision, but he's not telling everyone.
Well, I don't know. I think
like the writers, you think you should tell the writers.
No,
does Feige have a vision though? At this point,
I mean,
he's threatening everyone with like snipers, so he must have a vision of something.
I think part of it is like when we think back to the Infinity Saga and how the first Iron Man. The thing is, the Infinity Saga was not like Feige didn't sit down and plan from point A to point Z. What he did was that, like, hey, there's certain elements.
He made good movies first and foremost. That's the thing that people aren't getting. All of those MCU movies, even the lesser ones like Thor: The Dark World, are at the very least watchable, passable entertainment. And at best, you get like a Winter Soldier or a Guardians of the Galaxy, where it's genuinely some of the best in the genre. And we had that kind of like that good to great to awesome sort of like scale is just gone now. It's completely broken.
And I wonder if it's broken because they peaked. 2, COVID. 3, it's like the characters.
Oversaturation, Rohit. I think it's that simple.
What?
Oversaturation.
I know. I feel like I have to wait for how the rest of the year pans out, because if the rest of the year doesn't pan out as well as I think it should be, then I might be more on it, because at that point it's like,
I mean, right now it feels like Phase 4 is experimentation. Phase 5 is now we're trying to compete with Phase 3, which really seems not to be attainable so far.
Yeah, and then the success that they did have with Guardians Volume 3, to me, that's all on James Gunn. Like, that's
one thing. Guardians 3 is kind of a holdover because it took so long to, But I think in a perfect world, Guardians 3 probably would have been in Phase 4.
Right. Let's see.
So, anyway, the point being, the big question of Rhodey. So I guess the thing to speculate on here is, what do you think? So do you think some people speculate because if the legs aren't functioning, that's Civil War onward. If they're just numb, and it's like how long you've been here, there is the possibility that's Rhodey from Iron Man 2.
That'd be crazy.
I think he was captured.
Dragon, hold on. I'm sorry, Rohit. You know that whole gag about like, yes, it's me. Let's move on.
Exactly. That's what.
Just scroll the whole damn time.
We had this very conversation all the way to the episode. Yes, it could have been that's the meta gag of like that's why there's a new Rhodey. I know technically it's like it should be Terrence out, but the fact is, it's the fact that we've acknowledged there is a new Rhodey, but it was secretly intended.
I really think Rhodey was taken during Civil War, specifically when he landed on the ground and was unconscious. That's a prime time for a Skrull to, I think, to like take away this guy who's a decorated Air Force colonel and an Avenger, and presumably it's like, okay, like he's not gonna be like he's immobilized, so we can just replace him. And Skrulls can replicate themselves to be human on a cellular level, so they couldn't, be detected by any like human devices.
Here's the real question.
Yeah.
Is the Skrull, now here's the big reason I kept doubting the whole Civil War thing, but I mean I don't know if there's when the Skrulls shapeshift, do you think the Skrull is just that dedicated an actor that he's gonna like is somehow gonna make his legs that numb, like make him make himself paralyzed, he's gonna have to use the device and everything? Or can the Skrulls like naturally with their when they shapeshift, like the biology is going to actually mirror what Rhodey's biology is, so he's actually not going to be able to use his legs? Like, what do you think? Like, is he play acting, or is he actual, like, is that part of the shapeshift? Is that biological?
I think it would have to be biological,
because otherwise that'd be crazy, right? Otherwise, like, no Skrull could ever keep that.
No, because there had to be X-rays or whatever, and like diagnostics to see like, oh, your legs are broken or shattered or whatever. And you would have to, like, the leg braces would have to be specifically designed based upon the diagnosis, specific like the type of leg injury, right? because the way the brace is designed, it can't just be any sort of random like leg brace or whatever. So I would have to imagine Skrulls can mimic like disabilities or physical like damages because they're shapeshifters. Like they wouldn't be harmed in the process if that makes sense. Like if they just have their like human messed up legs could maybe not necessarily feel messed up for a scroll. They're just mimicking their biology up to that level.
I guess for me, the points at which I think Rhodey and swap that against Civil War is a go-to there. Iron Man 2 is going to be the real wow worthy one if they do that. But I think the place that it would make the most sense for the Skrulls to swap Rhodey, and that still plays in if you want the Civil War thing to happen or not, is that it's going to be right before Infinity War because he's like answering to the Secretary, answering the Thunderbolt Ross. He's in a position of power that's, and that probably, would lead to where he goes from there. So it's either that or it's purely after the blip when Rhodey's actually answering to the president, which they swapped him out there. It was the only two places that make the most sense to have a Skrull as Rhodey to me.
I think it would have been Civil War because I feel like for me,
I know you're right. There's a prime opportunity to swap them
and
in.
Also, for Rhodey, it would kind of make things interesting in Armor Wars if he's interacting with like all the Avengers, and it's like they make jokes or make something that's like, and he would feel off because it's like, well, that wasn't me that was like being chummy with you. That was like my doppelganger, and thus Rhodey in Armor Wars would be really alone because the Rhodey that had all these relationships and dynamics, it's like the like Avengers that he's close with aren't there because like if we're keeping with Civil War as like when Rhodey switched, the only Avengers he's familiar with is like Steve Rogers Cap, Natasha Romanoff Black Widow, Scarlet Witch, Vision, Falcon, and outside of those individuals, the only ones that are probably still out and active to the public is like Sam, but Sam's Captain America and is busy with his own thing, and it's just like that would be, I think, an interesting dynamic for like Rhodey's kind of out of sync with not just like, oh, he wasn't there when Tony died. It was
I think Civil War does give us the most story opportunities and where to go with Armor Wars.
Also, with the fact that like Rhodey goes AWOL in Infinity War, it gives new context if it was a Skrull. That's like, well, the thing is, it would kind of make you think like, okay, if Rhodey was actually Rhodey in Infinity War, would he have made the decision to go AWOL or would he have turned the future Avengers in? And that would have been a kind of an interesting where it's like, I think it's like post-Civil War, it's like Rhodey's willing to bend the rules. And I wonder if real Rhodey was there, would he be willing to bend the rules and, help the Avengers, against the interest of the U.S. government?
Yeah, that's interesting. You're not wrong. Regardless, this whole Armor Wars is going to be really interesting. Is the idea of having a Rhodey? We kind of lucked into it. We can have a Rhodey we're kind of coming into clean, like into the chaotic situation. It's going to be what Stark Industries is like after, in a post-Endgame world after we have the whole the Mysterio thing and everything and all that sort of stuff. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Plus, adding the new layers of Rhodey has he was impersonated by a Skrull and everything. He's lost so much time. He's going to be dealing with the status quo on all fronts. Now that's going to be interesting to see. So it's quite. I still wish we would have instead of just teased in that vague way. I just wish we said okay, how long? Okay, and that's something you could have done a post-credit scene.
I think that has not been decided. Or
maybe, I know you're right. They haven't decided. I'm saying, why can't they just decide it?
Well, because why? Okay, here's where I think is it. I think with I think probably 2019 they had a certain rough idea, and then 2020 with the pandemic was like, all right, we gotta figure this out. And I think the logistics with the pandemic and with now the strikes, I think what's happening is that the kind of, it wasn't fly by your seats, but there was certainly a lot of I
guess really,
it was certainly, I think Feige went in the Infinity Saga, he made good movies obviously, but in terms of the large cohesive vision, it was very flexible. He had the broad strokes, but it wasn't keyed down to specific details, which is why certain Easter eggs don't really match up to what happens later on in the Infinity Saga in phase 1. But I think with this, the problem is now it's when they try to commit to a specific plan, the specific plan, can't necessarily survive first contact with reality. And unfortunately, with reality as it was the past few years, certain decisions about like, oh, this character could show up in this, no, because of X, Y, and Z, and think and now. And when the strike ends, like things are gonna probably be even more. I think the plans are probably going to be changed significantly. Where like probably Feige has a specific idea where Rhodey is, but maybe with the strike, that's going to delay when Armor Wars comes out, and then depending upon where Armor Wars comes out in relation to other stuff, that's when things get hairy, and that's probably why it's vague. Because if we commit to a certain thing, a specific date or specific plot point, if certain projects don't release or line up in the proper order, that kind of gets undone or gets just like crumbles in itself.
I still think that our writers need like a story summit, like they do in the whole Death of Superman thing. Just put them all in a room and they kind of coordinate and maybe form the contingencies in case things get moved. Okay, these things will flow, these things won't flow. We can get on the same page with this, and Feige gives the thumbs up in his hat.
I really think I think like if they did, I really think the pandemic just kind of like put threw a wrench in things, and now with the strike, like hopefully when and if that is over, and hopefully when all the parties are satisfied with how the strikes are resolved, when they get back, there's going to be delays, and maybe they try to like put the rails on the track. There's no guarantees that like things won't have to change because there's been delays, and maybe certain like actors or writers move on to other projects, whatnot. So it's just kind of, I think there's just such a flux in the entertainment industry, and I think Marvel specifically has been so significantly impacted because there's so many like cooks, and maybe I think to Tika's point of oversaturation, if they didn't have as much projects like per year, maybe we were
They're announcing so many things so far in advance at this point that I feel like,
well,
to your
not
point,
anymore.
It's kind of like, well, yeah, but I mean, like up until current events, I feel like they were just being kind of bullish on how many things they were announcing. Guys, we should probably wrap this up. But Travis Mitchell's in the comments. He's asking, there's a scene in Endgame where the compound blows up. Brody falls out of his armor and nearly dies trying to talk to it. Yeah. So what do you guys say to that?
Yeah. So what Travis is bringing up right now, I brought this up episodes ago. Where this is so before Rohit's kind of confirmed it probably would be like down to a cellular level. They're going to be able to replicate the leg thing. I would be inclined to think like my line of thinking was okay because of that scene, like Rhodey, that would probably not be a Skrull, like just for that logic of like, if he's going to be in a life or death situation like that, he's not going to keep up the facade like that. But I don't know. I mean, again, if it's like on a cellular level, I don't know if he's going to be trapped like that or not. I don't know. Maybe it's I'm second guessing it now, but
because at least based on at least how the rules are established in Secret Invasion, it's like the only way we can figure out a person's a Skrull outside of just killing them straight off is that like you either have to dismember a body part, like Sonya did to that one Skrull person, or you have to. I guess it's like you have to really significantly. You have to shoot them in a significant part of their body that would cause them to
if it's a mortal wound of some kind.
Yeah, it has to be. It has to be significant pain to where the Skrull
they can't concentrate, and then it's gonna yeah. All right, let's see. So, the last thing we got to talk about here is, I guess, because we are kind of circling around a few other things. The real Fury and Sonya, they visit the president of the tension, which we actually kill Skrull Rhodey. I mean, that was a pretty good scene there. Little Fury's kind of going in there. Fury doing a speech of fun like he did in Phase 1 of the MCU is kind of like going in there. It's like calm, cool, collected, explaining it to the president, like. Very nice, very nice. Just kind of like the Iron Man, sort of like Iron Man 2 Fury's kind of rolling in there. It's like, this is what's going on here, Mr. President. It gets him to call off the strike. And anyway, so we kill Rhodey, and it traumatized the president to kind of his overreaction in terms of we're going to go to war on all these Skrulls, which of course incites the wrath of vigilantes, which are killing Skrulls, which already is going to be like traumatizing on air to people. We literally execution style killed a man on live air,
right?
And where then people are getting killed by mistake. Which again, I love that decision, which again does. You're right, guys. It does play into the paranoia we should have been doing from the beginning. But it's seeing that realized was really good, and the ramifications of that, and this fury. Just again, there are real world parallels to that scene too. That we live we live in scary, crazy times in which stuff like this would happen in response, and seeing that brought into the MCU does feed into that whole New York is very much kind of a recognizable world, and the MCU kind of reaches those parallels, much like the Marvel comics did. Like that's getting to the heart of what we should be doing at the core of this stuff.
I will say, just an aside, it does kind of feel crappy for Talos to sacrifice his life to save the president, and the president goes out on TV, announces the existence of Skrulls.
Yeah.
What's like a freaking?
It's a tragic moment, though. It's sad.
I doesn't feel. I mean, I don't know. I feel like the tragedy isn't really as felt.
Like everything Talos and Fury were afraid of came to fruition. The whole.
Yeah, but like it should be a sad ending, but the fact that like in this image that we have for our thumbnail, we have Nick Fury putting his arm behind his Skrull wife, and they're going in. And it's like it's just kind of.
But that's the coexistence of man and Skrull.
That's why I felt nothing at that ending. Just absolutely nothing.
Like nothing at all, really.
I'm sorry.
Well, regardless,
if it helps, I felt nothing at the end of the Haunted Mansion either.
You're dead on the.
Tiki really wanted. He really envisioned, and I think this would be a better ending. Nick Fury putting his arm behind Talos and them going to the ship. If anything, it's funny. It's like it feels like Nick Fury was more of Nick Fury and Talos are more of a married couple than Nick Fury and Navarro.
But guys, on a serious note, though, again, this is like Talos' dream represented in the last image of the show. It's man and Skrull, coexisting and everything.
Going into a spaceship and not having to deal with the realities of human prejudice.
I'm trying to light a candle.
To get on the spaceship, they just have to pretend to be human and just awkwardly shift in their seat as they hear any ignorant human being. It's like, oh, if there was a Skrull around me, I know who to kill. I know who to stop.
All right.
I'm just trying to light a candle here in the darkness, guys.
I know you are. You're doing your best. Okay.
And I'm blowing that candle.
All right.
Oh man.
I think is that a good note to end out on, guys?
No, it's not a good note. But we're gonna have to end there.
Well, do you have any other things you want to address, Dragon?
I mean, look. At the end of the day, Secret Invasion. Secret Invasion was a tall order, and we've already established. Sometimes we can't do the comic stories verbatim. I'm not saying that's what we were expecting, and I think at the end of the day, we were expecting kind of like a good Nick Fury show that was in the tone of something like the best of Nick Fury, which we saw in Winter Soldier. But clearly, the Disney Plus Marvel formula has struck again and said, I mean, sad note, true note to end out on here is that Disney Plus, this formula, this kind of like pattern that they've introduced in these Marvel shows and other shows, it's going to bite them in the end. Right now, there are talks. I mean, a lot of it's speculative, a lot of it's rumors, but it's someone's got to give. We have shows planned and movies planned, but they're cutting down on the shows, and I think that's for the reason that we're seeing here. This was an iffy finale. There's a lot I like about it, but compared to the others, though, there's still a pattern. Just like we have products on the whole that are hurt by weak moments, and reflecting on Secret Invasion, there are a lot of weak moments. There's strong acting, but there's weak moments in the story. There's a lot of things we didn't answer that we really should have answered. We should have shapeshifted in certain places, but there's hope things are going to change. There's hope that the Marvels will course correct some of this, but again, we're just living on hope versus like confirmed goodness, which I think we all need a little right now.
Yeah.
So it's a mixed bag.
Rohit, final thoughts?
I think ultimately. I just come away with a strong sense of disappointment, and I really feel it like a strong sense because I have appreciated and I've extolled the virtues of a lot of Phase 4 projects, and Phase 5 with Quantumania being okay, I liked it more than other people, but I didn't love it. Animated films are my favorite, but Guardians 3 and then this, and it's like I'm worried now that if Loki season 2, the Marvels and Echo aren't good, great. If they're just okay, that's fine. But if they're not, if they're if this is indicative of other projects, I'm really worried about the the staying power of the MCU because I'm feeling this, and I and I'm really feeling this. It's I think this should be a cause of concern. And for anyone that's out there, if you're wanting to watch something like Secret Invasion, watch Andor, watch Captain America: The Winter Soldier, watch even Wakanda Forever, or the Falcon and the Winter Soldier show, or even like the season of Agent Shield that had the LMD arc. Like there are other properties and other shows and movies that do a better job of the ideas and themes that are presented in this. And ultimately, I just feel in terms of watching something Disney Plus, this is not worth your time or energy.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's just kind of like been a reoccurring thing with literally all of these Disney Plus shows. Like they all have good elements to them, but I literally don't think a single one has really, honestly, when I really think about it, I honestly think Falcon and Winter Soldier might be the best one, just as far as like that show really didn't go off the rails at all. Like I don't like the Flag Smashers as villains all that much, but like really, I feel like that show stuck to landing pretty good. Outside of that, though, like really, the consistent problem with these shows is just the whole good premise, maybe a good few episodes, but there's just really not a lot of follow through. And
The endings are always complicated.
Secret Invasion, I think, is like the worst case scenario for that.
I really think Secret Invasion, the final product, there's just not a sense of not even it's not like I think to reiterate what I mentioned at the start, it's like identity is really important. And I think the Disney Plus shows in the past, well, what are their flaws? There's a sense of here's their purpose, here's how they want to go about saying with this character, this world, and whether it's successful or not, that's one thing. But Secret Invasion is just so unmoored, so directionless, so just like it's not tethered to anything tangible. And that's I think going to be the real concern for future MCU projects is that like you're just you're kind of making gobbledygook. Like
It very much feels like product.
yeah, and the thing is, even products can have a purpose and have a point to what they're doing. If you don't, if that product doesn't have a purpose or a point, and you're just kind of going in different directions without a sense of like cohesion, you might as well just watch paint dry because you see a purpose in paint. It eventually dries and it becomes part of the wall. And this just didn't have a purpose, or if it did, it was minimal and was more perfunctory than fundamental.
All right. Well, in spite of everything, I got to tell you guys, I am still kind of looking forward to the Marvels. If only because of the Miss Marvel of it all. I think she is selling the show or the movie for me, honestly.
It has a very solid trailer, that Marvel's movie, both of them.
I feel like I only watched the second trailer once. It didn't really leave much of an impression, but that first trailer was quite good. I thought.
Well, basically, most of the two is basically a rehash of the first trailer, because I'm saying basically collectively the trailer for the Marvels is looking good to me. It's looking like, man, I want to see that movie.
Okay. So big thanks to Kogias, Richard's Victims, and Travis Mitchell for joining us in the comments. All right. Well, that'll do it for us this week as we holster our remotes till the next installment calls for the draw. Sorry. Let me do that one more time. That'll do it for us this week as we holster our remotes till the next installment calls for the draw. Mano a mano. Just plus and us. Consume product and then get excited about the next product.
Go